It's impossible to talk about MotoGP in the modern era without talking about Marc Marquez. And now we have two Marquezes in the top field to talk about, and they're both on the same bikes in the same team. Of course, Alex Marquez, little brother, is joining his already legendary world champion brother Marc in the championship this year. A bit of a surprise. And to talk about what we should expect from the brothers Marquez this season, I have editor of the race, Matt Beer, and our new MotoGP correspondent, Simon Patterson. Matt, talk us through this one, because it was a whirlwind at the end of last year. And before we get on to what to expect from Alex as a rookie in arguably the top team in MotoGP, how did he end up on this bike?
Well, the end of the story was a whirlwind, but it was a whirlwind with a slow burn build-up that kind of started really as soon as Jorge Lorenzo began having a clearly horrible time on the factory Honda, and then when his injuries made things worse and he went kind of not missing for the summer, but he was absent for a long time, through which so much speculation about his future and what he might do and what Honda might do was just going crazy in his absence. So going to the Valencia weekend at the end of the season, speculation building that Lorenzo wasn't going to see out the rest of his contract, that situation was just untenable. And logically you're thinking, Zarco's there, doing okay on LCR so far. Crutchlow's a proven talent. If Lorenzo does quit, there's your options. That's nice and straightforward. Little rumour in the background that Alex Marquez, who's just won the Moto2 Championship, might be a wildcard option, but that's a fun footnote in the story. You're looking at Zarco, you're looking at Crutchlow. And then as the final Grand Prix weekend of the season got underway, it just became clear that actually Alex Marquez was the guy on pole for this, and that whether through extensive lobbying by Marc Marquez, according to some people, or just a coincidence that Alex had won the Moto2 title and was the best rider available, it's going to be two Marquez brothers at HRC. And that final turnaround from, this seems like a curious, fun idea to pop in the bottom of a story, to, no, this is fact. There he is testing the works bike as an official rider for next year. It was basically a crazy 72 hours, and the outcome is, yeah, the Moto2 champion steps into the team that's dominating the championship, but alongside his big brother, and on a bike that only his big brother can actually make a success out of at the moment.
Yeah, it's actually quite complicated, isn't it, Simon? And as Matt mentions there, you know, Alex is coming up as Moto2 champion. He's got credentials, but that Honda seems incredibly hard to ride. Now, a year ago, Jorge Lorenzo was moving into that team, and Honda were calling it a dream team of Marquez and Lorenzo. Is Marquez and Marquez going to be a dream team, or is Alex in for a bit of a shock, do you think?
I think Alex is going to get a very rude awakening very quickly. I think he's going to realise very soon how difficult that Honda is to ride. We've seen everyone struggle with it. We've seen even Marc admitting that it's by far the most difficult bike in the ride.
He crashes it a lot, doesn't he?
He crashes it a lot, yeah. And that shows just how much you have to be pushing to ride it. Maybe this year's bike will be a little bit easier. We know that that's what the riders have been begging for, especially Nakagami and Crutchlow, who've been put in an even trickier position than Marc, because they don't have the supreme talent that he seems to have. If they can make it a little bit more manageable, Alex can do okay, but he's not going to be setting things on fire. He's not going to be, anywhere near the front of the race. I just can't see it. He is the reigning Moto2 world champion, but it wasn't the most emphatic championship victory ever. He had a good mid-season while a few other people were struggling. But whenever you look at what other people managed to do by the end of the year, he was just sort of holding on there to take the title. It wasn't a clear win by any stretch of the imagination. The other problem that he's going to have this year, I think, is that traditionally whenever Alex has a big crash, he gets hurt. Something his brother doesn't do. Marc, we know, can crash week in, week out and just bounce back from it. He's back in the bike 10 seconds later. Alex has a history of big injuries, and I hate to say it, but I can't see that that's going to really help him out whenever he's riding a bike that's going to try and spit him off at every possibility.
So potentially he would have been better off coming in perhaps in the midfield or one of the smaller teams. Do you think maybe Honda should have given more serious consideration to some of the options Matt mentioned at the start, the likes of Zarco and Crutchlow? Should they have found a way to get a more proven MotoGP rider on that second bike?
Absolutely. For me, the sensible option would have been Crutchlow. He has experience of the bike, he has experience of the factory teams before at Ducati, and to move him up and then to put Marquez into the LCR team, that would have been a good lineup. Even to move Taka Nakagami up to the factory team, I think would have been a much, much less severe step than what they've put Alex under. My gut feeling is that Honda feel that Nakagami is just not ready for that yet, and they're nurturing him as their sort of big Japanese talent coming through. We know Honda loves a Japanese rider on board. My gut feeling with Cal is that maybe the offer was put to him and he wasn't as amenable to it as you might think he would be. he's got a good thing going at the minute. The LCR team is built for him. He does the bare minimum of PR, which trust me, Cal loves. He's not a fan of it. And he's got so much less pressure. He's still on a factory contract. He's still capable of winning races. None of that's really going to change if he'd been in an orange bike instead of a white one. But there's a lot of negatives. So Zarco is a slightly more interesting one. He maybe has burned his bridges a little bit. We know he's made it back into MotoGP this year. He's riding for Avintia and Ducati, but even that came with a little bit of controversy after he slammed the team as a bunch of amateurs before signing for them. But Honda are risk averse in a lot of ways, and I think they'll have looked at what Zarco did to KTM walking out mid-season and thought, yeah, that's not for us. That's not a risk we can take after the instability that they've had with first Pedrosa leaving and then Lorenzo only managing the last 1 year because of injury, and then another rider. I think they want someone who can be a little bit long-term. And I'm sure Marc's lobbying didn't hurt either.
Do you think Alex can be that long-term solution? Even if he has a difficult first year, you'd imagine that it's going to take a while to spit the second rider out when he's related to the guy winning all your championships.
Well, this is it. That becomes a very difficult conversation if he is really struggling. The Marquez brothers are close. Obviously, siblings are close, but you look at how Marc celebrates Alex's achievements all the way through his career. Marc's really invested in Alex doing well and getting his brother, and it would be crazy to think this didn't come down to a lot of Marc putting his brother forward. Getting his brother in the biggest team in MotoGP, there's a lot riding on that for Marc as well. He's going to be looking at the other side of the garage a lot more than he has been in the last couple of years. So if Alex struggles, Marc Marquez can dislocate his shoulder and still win the race that afternoon when he's crashing the warm-up or something. So Marc Marquez being knocked off his stride by worrying about his little brother struggling is not going to really affect his form. But it is going to, I can see it putting a bit more of a complication into some of his weekends than would be the case if it was someone he wasn't related to having a nightmare time on the second bike. It might be too harsh to assume Alex is going to have a nightmare time, but I just think, as Simon said, his career so far, how the Honda handles, everything suggests this is too much too soon, maybe the right rider further down the line, but wrong place right now. In theory, it shouldn't work and it shouldn't last. If it doesn't work, it might last anyway, just because of who he is and what that situation is. Honda need to keep hold of Marc Marquez. They can't afford to let him go anywhere else.
A long-term future then potentially for the two Marquezes at Honda, but how is Alex going to get on? And could any struggles for him potentially weigh Marc Marquez down when he's trying to rewrite the record books in MotoGP? Let us know what you think, and let us know what you want to see from the race over the course of this year, and make sure you follow @WeAreTheRace on social media for many more updates on what we'll be up to this year.